Looks like we have a good amount of people right now, and people can trickle in as we get started. So I'll just do a quick introduction. Hi, my name is Madeline, and I'm the new AIE manager. I joined the Virginia Sea Grant back in March, so I'm very new to the program in the industry. But if you don't already know, the Aquaculture Information Exchange is a grant-funded project by NOAA and the USDA, and then the Virginia Sea Grant hosts the platform. And our goal is just to create a welcoming online environment for the aquaculture community, and so we encourage users to share their insights and collaborate with fellow members. So we're really excited that you guys could be here today. Um, that being said, my inbox is open always. I shared my email in the chat. So if you have any suggestions on future webinars or stuff that you'd like to see on the exchange in the future, please ping me. Well, feedback is always welcome, and I'm always excited to share new ideas. So two more housekeeping things. I will be adding a recording of this Zoom session on our YouTube channel, which I've also linked in the chat. And then I created a discussion thread in the AIE webinars group. And that is just in case you have any questions or you want to continue the conversation after this webinar, you're very much encouraged to do so on that thread. I can answer questions. Imani, of course, can answer questions. The only other thing I would say is we have questions at the end, but otherwise, I think I'll turn it over to Imani for right now and let her get started. I'm super excited to learn about minorities in aquaculture. Let me unshare my screen.
Perfect. Thank you, Madeline, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I'm sure majority of everyone's on their lunch break or something to that effect, so I appreciate you spending this hour with me. Like Madeline said, my name is Imani Black, and I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit that I started in 2020 called Minorities in Aquaculture. For those of you who aren't familiar with MIA yet or myself, I started out as an oyster farmer, and then got into the nonprofit space a little bit later, like I said, in 2020. So, how did I get here? Going from oyster farmer to nonprofit founder. Well, I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland, so coastal community, born and raised, and a lot of my family ties, obviously, like a lot of families in coastal communities, date back to hundreds of years of people doing very traditional cultural occupations in those coastal communities, watermen, fishermen, working in the seafood industry, things like that. So you could say that working in the seafood and aquaculture space was kind of destined and in my DNA. But I kind of stumbled upon it. I wanted to be a tropical biologist at first, then got into oyster restoration when I was in college during an internship, and then eventually stumbled upon Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences oyster aquaculture training program. So I am an OAT graduate, for those of you who know the OAT program. And that really got my, 6-year career in aquaculture and being on oyster farms started really from there, learning all about hatcheries, nurseries, and farms. That was really my first step into the aquaculture door and what this career could even be. So I know that this is probably a stupid question within this space of what is aquaculture, right? Because why are we here to learn more about aquaculture? And I know that a lot of people on this call already know what aquaculture is. So just going off the definition that we do know and really kind of expanding it, right? From, yes, we know that aquaculture is just the sister of agriculture. So the things that we do terrestrially, we also do them with our seafood production too. But I really challenge people to think beyond this definition of what aquaculture is, because really when we think of the seafood industry, there's so many different parts that have always been intertwined in the industry and in the heritage of the industry, and aquaculture is really no different. So really, these maritime occupations or aquaculture occupations in general, I would say, have really been kind of looked over in the past generations of this is something that I want to do. You know, back in the day, again, when my family was working on the water and, you know, a lot of other people were working on the water, it was a high commodity job. You know, seafood populations were high, water quality was also high, and you know it was a good living. And over that time, as populations have, you know, ebbed and flowed, and our water quality in a lot of areas has ebbed and flowed, but also our coastal communities have really just been fighting this balance between ecotourism and a working waterfront. Aquaculture has really kind of come into heavy into this conversation of really, in my opinion, being a buddy system to our wild fisheries, not a replacement. And same thing with its occupations and why all of this really matters. You know, aquaculture is really one of the fastest growing industries, you know, in our country right now and just in the world globally. And that's all coming from the technology that's coming out of it, the innovation, the leaders that are, you know, really pushing for sustainability within the space. But really what I think, you know, the importance of aquaculture is now is our food security and our food production. Aquaculture feeds communities, and really what we see within MIA is that not only is this something that is huge in a lot of states, just like Maryland, you know, Maryland, for example, aquaculture and the seafood industry are one of the biggest streams of revenue within the state, locally and on a state level. Not only bringing in, you know, different jobs each year, but just its value over the last, you know, 400 some years as it's grown and as it's changed. And that's not a unique story. That is very much the similar stories in a lot of coastal communities, and now even starting in landlocked states where, you know, land-based aquaculture and seafood production is becoming a part of those economies as well. So I said back in the what is aquaculture definition, I wanted to really kind of expand your just perspective or thought on that definition to being something more. And this is really where kind of the crux of that comes in. Like I said before, aquaculture feeds communities, but in MIA, we recognize that there are a lot of people that don't see themselves in this industry or don't see how they can contribute to this industry or how they can, you know, even learn about this industry. And so for me, and the work that we do with minorities in aquaculture is really trying to advance the next generation of workforce development in aquaculture and the maritime industries. And in doing that, a lot of people are like, well, not everyone wants to work on a boat. Not everybody wants to, be cutting up fish and things like that. And I really am, and MIA is really pushing the point of we have to have a multidisciplinary approach when it comes to aquaculture. There are tons of different applications that you can have that are really keeping this train on the tracks, from media to business management to engineering and infrastructure to, you know, technology and research and science and the community and, public education and all these different things that really make aquaculture what it is. And so we have to start thinking about how people can have a long lasting and sustainable impact within this industry on all of those multiple different scales. And so really, from here, I know I have some students on this call, and I'm not sure like where you guys are in your journey or where people are within their journey of their career. But if you are thinking about having an aquaculture career or trying to, I know that there are a lot of different questions that come up when you're trying to figure out what's my next step? What does my career really look like? And I think, in my conversations with people of have you considered aquaculture, these are really some of the questions that, I really talk with them about, right? Because I know everyone brings a different skill set to the table. So, learning and really knowing what you like about a job and what you don't like about a job are equally as important. And I think really people kind of, when you ask them, well, what do you want to do? Like, what's your kind of dream career? It's like, well, I want to be in the lab and I want to research and I want to do this. And it's like, okay, but really like what's in that, right? So you want to do research and you want to be in the lab. What things are you trying to research, right? Are you trying to have, field days and work outside? Are you just trying to work in the lab and do research? Are you interested in, kind of the ecological anthropology aspects of this research? Or are you looking into the more scientific? If you're not into the lab, are you looking into building and infrastructure and technology? If you're, just love the seafood aspect of it, are you interested in, being a business owner within that sense? Or even if you love the public education side, and science communication is one of the things that's in the mix there. And so I really, I think in aquaculture, we have some of the coolest jobs really that a lot of people have never heard of or never really thought of. And I think really it's really just coming from the people that think that you have to work out in the water to be in aquaculture. And yes, I am one of those people that like I can't be in a lab. I need to be outside, which is why I started as an oyster farmer and kind of, skipped for the time being going to grad school straight away from undergrad, eventually going back, 7 years later. But really, I think for me, I wanted to be hands on. I wanted to, do something that was physical. And so obviously, if you're interested in that, there are tons of different opportunities within aquaculture that fit for you and that can fit for you. But I want to, really kind of just emphasize some of the other things that maybe people aren't thinking about, right? If you don't want to be on the boat, but you still want to have that connection with the farmers, with that side of aquaculture, with the, the harvesting and the producing, there's, the farm to table, farm to restaurant is a big thing that we've all heard. And, sustainability in aquaculture doesn't just have to mean working out in the water. It could be the way that you run your seafood business of educating people with the seafood that they eat. In this picture right here that I'm cheesing in with Chef Derek Wagner from Nick's on Broadway in Providence, Rhode Island. He goes down to the docks every morning to get the fish from the local fishermen, and is very seasonal about his picks and really understands the story and tells that to his customers because he really feels like that's important, and that's on every single menu every day. And even educating his chefs and his product developers and just the whole supply chain of it all. You can be really involved in the moving and shaking of seafood and sustainability in aquaculture, even if it's not on the water. There's another part of the supply chain that really is important that I think is a big gap right now between really farm to restaurant, because people truly aren't understanding all that goes into kind of the first part of it. Obviously outreach and is one thing within science that is huge when it comes to people really understanding, and for the industry, us making our information palatable to the public. But I mean, as much as work as we've done, that's been really great in this space, we still need really strong stewards that continue to be within science communication. And again, it doesn't just have to be on social media or being a content creator and things like that. I was just at a middle school expo with 450 middle schoolers in Harford County in Maryland, and I thought that they were all wanted to be content creators. They quickly told me that that was not accurate, that they were not the generation that wanted to be content creators, that they wanted to be neuroscientists and they wanted to be engineers and they wanted to, go and work at SpaceX and like all of these things. And so, for them, it was social media and outreach and just communications is just more of something that they absorb, something that they learn from instead of really contribute into. And I thought about that of like, wow, well, like if they are paying attention, then we need people out there that are really going to tell whatever they're passionate about to its fullest, right? Helping people understand why it's important, why these different aspects need to be talked about, way more than what they're doing now. There's a lot of misconceptions about aquaculture, and we rely on folks that are able to really hone in on science communication in an effective way and in a creative way to be able to tell not only just the right information, but the stories of aquaculture as well. And then, obviously there's the infrastructure side, right? And I say obviously in the sense of it's obvious to me that every oyster farmer has, cages, has equipment that they need to deal with and that they work with to be able to make, their operation move soundly and to be able to harvest and do the things that they need to do for our seafood industry. But I think a lot of people kind of think of only tech and on the sciencey side and not really on that infrastructure side. A few years ago, I had a MA member that came to me and said, I want to switch my career. I've been an engineer for 10 years and, I just don't know how that fits into aquaculture. And I'm like, well, do you know that, there are some oyster farmers that are creating their own cages themselves because the standard cages that they have aren't working for them. So they've MacGyvered and manufactured their own cages for farmers by farmers. There's, robotics, there's all of these things that, I think from top to bottom that really can be improved, that can be, enhanced. I know a lot of people are trying to get more, less plastics and less of that material in our infrastructure and aquaculture. And, there is somebody that is brilliant out there that's going to, work with these people and collaborate to be able to make this happen. And so that's why we need people from kind of all different sides to be thinking about what technology really is going into it and what's going to be sustainable for us to make aquaculture, whether that's, small scale to offshore, to small, operations, large operations, what's going to make it so that it's as efficient and as effective as possible moving forward. So I say this to kind of, get towards the end of my presentation, but just going back to, my career a bit and really saying, I didn't have a conventional track to get here. I wish that I could say that I did. But like I said, I started out as an oyster farmer and really kind of skipped the grad school track for a bit, and, kind of, had a difficult time in undergrad and really didn't think that grad school was for me. And so when I went back to grad school in 2021 while starting the organization, I had a different sense of appreciation and lens and perspective about it, on two folds of one, I'm really glad that I didn't go to grad school right after undergrad, because I don't think that I would be here today if my trajectory was the standard, right? And I think sometimes we get caught up in, oh, like my future job or my future track has to be the standard or what people are telling me that I need to do. And really what we've seen out of, famous artists and entrepreneurs and change makers and innovators is that the path is not linear, and so maybe the job that you think that you want to have isn't really the job that's going to be your purpose or is going to align with all the things that you love or what you're good at or, really what the world needs, right? It's a journey of finding out how you can be as impactful in this industry as possible. And so that's why we really kind of, really just tell our interns, our members, and just our community to really think about aquaculture careers as a multidisciplinary level, right? Really think about it as if you don't see something in aquaculture right now that you feel like is needed, then do it. That's your opportunity to step into that gap. I tell people all the time, I'm like, if there's a person that's, destined to be in the insurance business, like they have a family insurance business, but they're like, I don't want to do that. I'm not, I want to be out on the water. I want to be in aquaculture. I'm like, do you know that there is no insurance agencies like right now in aquaculture? I mean, best of both worlds, right? So I think really thinking about really what is needed, what's going to be impactful for everybody in the industry moving forward, and also what is the best way in your purpose and passion and just what and what you want to contribute, like what's going to be encompassed in all that for you. And so, yeah, like I said, in my journey, I knew that working on the water existed, but I didn't know what I'm doing today existed at all. I also was not on my life bingo card again to start a nonprofit or to be speaking to you today or doing the things that I'm doing now. But, it was all, a jump and a leap, that I just sort of a path I really just followed. And I learned a lot from working as an oyster farmer. I miss it every single day. And I am, trying to creatively develop my way so that I can at least have a couple of days out of the week that I'm on an oyster farm and doing the things I'm doing now. But I think really there is a lack of opportunity and exploration in careers in aquaculture right now for the next generation. There's a whole generation that are trying to find jobs that are financially stable, that, really drive them with purpose, that are sustainable for the environment, that really give them, cause and action to move forward in a better way on this planet. And I think that aquaculture is one of them. And I think that if we really position aquaculture and the ways that we see different paths within aquaculture in that way, we will get people flooded into these careers. So when beginning MIA and building MIA, we have been able to create a lot of opportunities for primarily, women of color that are, want to be in the industry or that are trying to grow in the industry. We've had, about 50 people that have come through our internship program, and about 8 of them right now are working full time in the industry somewhere around the country doing something in a different sector. And that is the number that we're really focusing on, for the years to come, is that retention number. Because right now in aquaculture careers, retention is low. The average age of, between aquaculture and the maritime industry for workforce is 65. So we don't have a lot of time to really kind of get really good, brilliant, intelligent, innovative people into these spaces when we have hundreds of thousands of positions going unfilled, each year. So that's something within MIA that we've been trying to create, and we have been creating over the last 6 years, and that I'm really proud to really just be a part of that advancement in the workforce development in aquaculture. So yeah, I'll wrap up with just, a few things, if, so that hopefully you walk away from this taking away from, just something knowledgeable and something useful. But, these are just a few things that I wish I had figured out or just knew a little bit earlier. Everyone feels like they have to have it figured out. And I'm just here to tell you that you don't. I don't even have it figured out. A lot of people, I'm sure on this call, have gone through, something. It's only 1:30 to, right now. I'm sure their morning has had trials and tribulations that, have just made it harder for them to, make it through that challenge. And everybody goes through that. I just was at a career networking event yesterday, and one of the other speakers was like, if you don't feel like you're failing every day, then you're not being an entrepreneur. You're not, being an innovator, right? Because that means that you're trying different things, that you're not putting yourself in a box to really challenge yourself to not only think outside of your own realms, but to learn more, to collaborate more, to talk to more people, and to really just like find what your overall purpose within your career is, right? Your career is not just, what you do for work or what you do for money. It's really, a part of your story, and your story is your strength. For me, I've had a lot of trials and tribulations and different mishaps and things like that through my career and just my life. And I think that a lot of those things have really built me to be where I am today and be able to have the capacity to do everything that MIA is doing and my team is doing, and all the great things that we've been able to do over the last 6 years and are continuing to do. And I think that, it just comes with really changing, the world or changing your community and being an impactful leader. So, and really, I think, the last thing is, a lot of people don't see themselves in aquaculture, but what they don't know is that they already are part of its future, and it's already a part of theirs. And that's like such a powerful thing. We already know that aquaculture is intertwined in a lot of our food production. We know that, we don't have US based seafood right now. 90% of our seafood gets imported into the United States. And that is because we don't have the infrastructure in the United States, in our country, to be able to not only harvest our own seafood, but to process it, package it, and to get it on our shelves. And if we're looking to do that, if we're looking to pull aquaculture towards this more sustainable, accessible, like equitable path, then everybody needs to be able to see how they can contribute into aquaculture and how aquaculture contributes to them. So I just leave you with we are a part of aquaculture's future. And, however that may be, in whatever realm that may be, that's a really, really powerful and special thing, in my opinion. So I will end and wrap up with any questions, like Madeline said, with Q&A. But I'm interested in any questions you may have, or what's coming up for you in aquaculture lately, what's sparking you, what's like fueling your passion within aquaculture. So yeah, I'll answer any questions, and you can ask me anything. But thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Imani. That was incredible. If anybody doesn't have a question right now, I can kick it off. I did have a question on I guess, where do you think that companies could kind of help with um, there's only like one specific thing that some companies in aquaculture do. It's either like oyster farmers or hatcheries, and there's very specific roles in that. Where do you
Mhm.
think that there could be for companies to help expand or broaden their like career needs and their bandwidth needs through creativity, like arts and science communication in any industry that doesn't directly do with the actual production side of aquaculture, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. So basically, how can like different sectors of the industry be more creative in how we're communicating what we do within aquaculture? Is
Yeah.
that okay? So yeah, no, great question. I think yeah, there has to be some creativity there, right? We have to be able to tell the full story, and I think if you start with your particular sector of the story and just or the story of your operation or what you do to contribute into the industry or how you're connected within in the industry or even promoting other people within the industry. I think that's how we can really keep the conversation momentum going. When it comes to careers, I think people have to get. I know people are really working hard to get their jobs out there, right? Aquaculture Information Exchange has a great, job board. MIA keeps up a great job board. World Aquaculture Society keeps up a great job board. So there are a lot of different resources that are out there, but I think not everybody knows about those websites, right? Until they get into aquaculture. And so I think we have to think about how do we get people even to be like, huh, or I wonder where that came from. And then we show them the way towards all these really great resources. So I think it's just a little bit more on the front end, a little bit maybe more localized into your area. But I know that people are really trying hard to stop the kind of fast turnover within aquaculture positions. But it's always a balance, and I think we're moving in the right direction of it for sure.
That's awesome. Thank you. Does anybody
Yeah.
else have any questions? Hi, Mona. Do you have a question for Amani? Anybody can have a question, or we can talk about it in the discussion thread, and you can email Amani personally.
No, sorry for joining late, Madeline. Thank you so much for organizing this. Imani, Seagrant is such a big fan of you, so thank you so much for being with us, for joining us, and for sharing your wisdom and expertise, knowledge with us.
Thank you, Mona. I appreciate that.
We have a question in the chat. What are some ways a young woman of color can stand out in the industry instead of being looked over? Unfortunately, the aquaculture industry still does have biases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I say within MIA all the time, even though we are trying to change the industry, that doesn't mean the industry has changed yet. There has to be a culture shift within aquaculture, I think, to really have this happen. And it's necessary now. I mean, women have come such a let's go even broader, right? Because I think when we talk about all women in the industry, we've done a lot and come a long way in the last 40 years in this industry. I don't think that, many women that started out in the early years of aquaculture even thought that a women's session at a conference or seeing a line at the women's bathroom at a conference was even going to be a thing. And so I think sometimes we have kind of seen that as a ceiling of like, well, we're here. They're giving us a space. They're letting us up on the panels. They're letting us be the keynotes. And somehow that's gotten lost in translation that that's enough. And so I think that even though I'm so happy with how far we've come and the space that we've created for women in the industry over the last 40 something years, there has to be evolution to it. And I think to this question, that evolution is bringing in women of color. That's expanding to women of color, because before that wasn't even a part of the discussion. It was just women in general. And so now we have to be really intentional about what that evolution is moving forward. And I think ways that young women of color, young people of color can really start standing out in the industry is just continuing to be bold, right? So like social media is a powerful thing. And there are people that are on social media right now that are getting big for oysters and things in our industry that aren't even in our industry. And so that to me is, I'm really happy to see that go forward. But I'm also like, there's an opportunity for people that are actually in this industry to share that light and to have a little bit of that momentum too. So I would say, yeah, just keep being bold, just, keep being in the mix, keep being knowledgeable about what's going on in the industry, and, just keep really making your presence known. And that's the best thing you can do. And when you do make your presence known, you change biases, not only just for yourself, but for other women that look like you, when you stand true in what you're saying, when you're courageous in what you're saying, and when you're knowledgeable about what you're saying too. I think all of those things really matter. But yeah, it's a struggle. But I think, yeah, it really comes down to the industry as a whole has to have a evolution of a culture shift when it comes to that.
That's awesome. That's really inspiring. We have another question. How much salary influence turnover in the industry how much salaries influence turnover at the industry?
I mean, huge, huge. I mean, from my standpoint, right? Because I can share my story transparently. I started out in the industry as the one of the brokest oyster farmers that you ever could have known. I was making 10.25 at my very first oyster farming job. By the time I left that job, I was making, 10.75, and I was like, I'm moving up. And I had to have a lot of those hard conversations with myself of, am I going to have dinner tonight? Then am I going to go to the grocery store? Am I going to have enough gas to get to work tomorrow? Well, I can't miss work because I need money. So I guess, it's going to be a can of beans tonight and early bedtime. And so I've had to deal with that. I've had that experience. And so within MIA, that is something that really was at the crux of our internship program, right? All of our interns get paid $17.50 an hour. And I know that a lot of other internship programs have started to, do that to a higher wage. What we've started to see over the years is this influence of salaries, right, in the industry, in that turnover, because going from $17.50 an hour to 15 an hour, which is, 14.15 is a standard in the industry right now, which again, 10.25 to 14.15, I'm like, guys, we have moved up. we have advanced, okay? But I also know that also living costs have also increased. So that's also like where the misbalance is. But for our interns and some people that come in through MIA, that jump is very detrimental, going from $17.50 an hour to housing being covered to transportation reimbursement to gear, thousands of dollars of gear, like all of these things, to going from, well, now I have to cover everything at $15 an hour. That's tough. And so, yeah, I do think that salaries influence a high turnover in the industry. I think any labor intensive job is like that right now. Any hands-on job is like that right now. But this is where we have to get creative and multidisciplinary with the careers in aquaculture too, right? Not everybody, when we think of aquaculture, is going to work out in the water, and we don't need everybody to. But also, the more that we advance this industry, the more that those farms are able to pay a higher wage and able to pay a salary. When I first left the industry to do MIA and go back to grad school, I was a salaried employee. So 10.25 to a salaried employee where I was living by myself and taking care of myself, it's possible. But I was at a company that not only had a hatchery, but had a farm, but also had a warehouse too, selling equipment. So they were also in different sectors of the industry. So I think really, yeah, it influences a lot. It's unfortunate. I think living wages right now is influencing all careers. But I think for aquaculture, we have to be really creative about what those careers are, and also what workforce development is getting a lot of money within aquaculture right now. So I'm hoping that that tide will change and we're able to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Um, any more questions before we end the call? We can also talk again in the discussion if you want to continue the conversation, or you can reach out to Imani. But I'll just give it a minute.
Maybe I will ask one question as others are thinking.
Yeah.
Imani, I am really impressed by your career, your comments. My apologies again that I came in a little late, but I've been reflecting on the impact that AI has on all of our jobs and our field. And if you haven't reflected on this already, could you talk a little bit about how AI is impacting aquaculture industry and in particular your work, and what are you doing to stay up to speed with it, sort of upskill yourself, or what advice might you have for emerging leaders who are thinking of the being in the space but also know that rapid advancements in technologies are really changing the job sector.
Yeah, absolutely. One, I will make very clear that data centers have no place on any coastal community, and I am a firm reliever of that, of no data centers. So what I have reflected on is that if everyone is against data centers, then we really have to showcase how important these maritime occupations and this maritime space really is, especially within coastal communities where the seafood production is really happening. And that is, directly coming from us and how we position it, the narrative of it, all these things. I don't think that we should shy away from technology advancement within aquaculture, because there have been a lot of great advances in technology that have really helped the production of aquaculture. From going from the tumbler, the oyster tumbler, so a quicker and faster way of sorting through oysters and cleaning oysters and making sure oysters are more uniform and things like that. That's a big thing within the hospitality industry right now. People love a nice, pretty little cup. That wouldn't have come without technology. But I also think that we have a tendency always to kind of maybe take it to a level it doesn't need to get to. So I will say this is why in this talk, I put technology, because that's going to be a big thing, and we need people that are not only environmental stewards but are also in that lane to come into the forefront. Because when you are an environmental steward, you then will understand the impact and the consequences of the technology that you are pushing forward. And I think that we could really harness and use technology to make aquaculture more sustainable if we used it in the right way. So I don't shy away from it. I definitely don't love all parts of it, but I think that we really kind of have a leg to stand on right now, being one of the biggest industries in the world, of what that technology is going to do and what is going to be and how we're going to move forward in the future with it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Good
Mona.
question, Mona. Okay, anybody else? Otherwise, we can thank Imani, and I will send a recording out on the Aquaculture Information Exchange, and I will also post it on our YouTube channel. Both of those links are in the chat if you need a directory. But yeah,
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming again. I appreciate it.
thank you so much, Imani. This was
Yes.
amazing. The AIE will always support minorities in aquaculture, and I hope we can find more ways to collaborate
Likewise.
in the future.
Likewise. I think what you guys are doing is great. So thank you all for your great work, everybody on the team. And thank you so much again for having me today.